Every single tear we cry tells a story, but it's not just an emotional one. It turns out our tears hold chemical secrets about what we're feeling and even how we're wired to connect with each other. Today, we're diving deep and decoding the biology of feeling.
So, we all cry. But have you ever actually stopped to wonder if the tears you shed from pure joy are chemically different from the ones you cry when you're sad? Or even from chopping an onion? It sounds like a simple question, right? But the answer opens up this fascinating window into our own biology.
Well, a recent study decided to find out for real. Scientists use this really powerful technique. It's called non-targeted metabolomics, which is basically like taking a high-tech chemical snapshot of the tears. And the results? They were totally definitive. Not all emotional tears are created equal, not even close.
Okay, get this. The difference between happy tears and sad tears is just stunning. They have completely different metabolic profiles. The study found that sad tears are tied to things like estrogen signaling and inflammation, but happy tears, they're linked to stuff like biotin and, believe it or not, caffeine metabolism. It's like they come from two completely different biological worlds.
So why in the world would our bodies go to all that trouble to produce chemically distinct tears? Well, this isn't just some random biological quirk. It strongly suggests our tears are acting as really complex signals. But, a signal is totally useless without a receiver. And that brings us to the brain, and a much deeper question about how each of us is uniquely built to interpret these emotional cues.
So what is this receiver for all our emotional signals? Well, it turns out the answer lies in the unique wiring of our brains, which basically determines how we perceive and process everything from the world around us.
It comes down to this fundamental biological trait called environmental sensitivity. Now, this isn't about being emotional in the way we usually talk about it. It's actually a measure of how deeply a person perceives and processes sensory information. It's a core piece of our neurobiology.
And this is just a brilliant illustration of the fact that we're not all walking around with the same emotional volume knob. We all exist somewhere on this spectrum of sensitivity, which means some of us are just naturally tuned to pick up on more subtle cues. Like the kind that might be carried in our tears. Researchers have recently come up with this really great way of thinking about it. They suggest we fall into three main groups. About 30% of us are like dandelions. We're pretty robust and less affected by our environment. Then you've got 40% who are tulips with a medium level of sensitivity. And another 30% are highly sensitive orchids who are way more profoundly affected by both the bad and the good stuff in life. So when you put all of this together, this incredible picture starts to form. You've got these chemically complex tears acting as signals, and on the other end, they're being interpreted by brains that have fundamentally different levels of sensitivity. This combination creates a totally unique emotional fingerprint for every single one of us. Okay, so we have this intricate, finely tuned system for emotion, but it's also, surprisingly, pretty fragile. So what happens when we push it to its limits with something as common as, say, a single sleepless night? Look, we've all been there, tired and grumpy. But a study wanted to know what specifically gets messed up in our social perception. They didn't just want to know if we get worse at reading people. They wanted to know which emotions become harder for us to see. And to make it really challenging, they didn't just use simple, obvious pictures. No way. They showed participants these computer-morphed faces, blended, ambiguous expressions like 70% happy and 30% surprise. This forced their brains to work a lot harder to figure out the social cues. Now, you might think that your ability to read all emotions would just drop across the board, right? But that's not what happened at all. The data is just striking. The ability to recognize happiness and sadness, it plummeted after just one sleepless night. But when it came to anger and fear, their accuracy stayed almost exactly the same. Just think about what that means for a second. Our brains, when they're sleep deprived, go into survival mode and prioritize threat detection. Our ability to spot anger and fear, the more primitive is this a threat emotions, it stays perfectly intact. What gets sacrificed is our ability to recognize the very emotions that are most crucial for social connection, for affiliation, and for empathy. So we've seen this system is sensitive and it's easily strained. But what happens when the wiring doesn't just get strained? What happens when it actually breaks down? This can actually happen in certain neurological conditions, like after a stroke or with multiple sclerosis.
It's a phenomenon known as excessive crying, and it's where the normal, everyday link between feeling an emotion and actually expressing it becomes damaged.
Now, it's so important to understand this. This is not about people feeling overwhelmingly sad. Instead, it's a malfunction in the brain's hardware, the machinery that controls the physical act of crying. This condition is pretty much the ultimate proof that our emotional expressions are governed by this complex and really vulnerable biological machinery.
Okay, so let's pull all these different threads together. The chemistry of a tear, the wiring of our brains, and how fragile it all is, to see the incredible big picture that emerges from all this. When you look at all the evidence, it becomes crystal clear. From the tiny little metabolites in a single teardrop, all the way up to the massive, intricate networks in our central nervous system, it's all part of one beautifully complex, interconnected system.
So ultimately, all of these pieces, the tears, our brain wiring, our perception, they all come together to form what you could call our biological empathy engine. Our bodies create these sophisticated chemical signals, and our brains are uniquely tuned to perceive them. This entire system is what allows for the social bonding that is so fundamental to being human. And as we've seen, it's an incredibly delicate system.
This intricate machinery isn't just some side effect of our evolution. It is absolutely central to it. Its very existence shows just how deeply wired we are for connection. And its fragility is this powerful reminder of just how important it is to protect our own well-being and that of the people around us.
And that leaves us with a final thought to consider. Knowing how beautifully complex and delicate this internal system really is, what can we do for ourselves and for each other to better care for it? Thanks for joining this explainer.